And I think
right.
that's what's
Yeah.
interesting is, I mean, you look at the printing press and, so all of a sudden
Yeah.
you've got the scriptures in your hands. Because what happened was, I mean, you're moving from a situation where even what you did have was mostly written in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you could get your hands on it, you probably couldn't read it. And so when the printing press comes along, at first you're just getting more of that. And it's just easier for, you to have, a Bible in every parish where you got the material there. But then you start to have people beginning to translate the scriptures into their own language. And then you start getting it into people's hands and they begin to be able to read it for themselves. And, you think of the Reformation, you think of Luther, and Luther wasn't at first trying to, start a new break off of the church. He just saw some things that he thought were not going well and wanted to see them change. And essentially, because nobody wanted to change those things, we saw, what we saw. But it was because of people being able to sit down and begin to read it in their own language that you begin to see this doesn't really fit in with what I'm reading here. And I think we see a lot of that, even we can look at the church today. There's a lot of times where I'm reading things and going, this doesn't look like what we do. But I think what's interesting now is what you just said there about the wisdom and the knowledge. You see those same things coming because a lot of those guys that you see that beginning, they still had that background knowledge because a lot of them were priests. A lot of them had that understanding, those people that led that out. But now you look and like religious TikTok in particular is an interesting place to go because there is so much uninformed, just spouting out whatever they think in the moment about whether it's Christianity or other religions or these things, just because they're upset with how they understand what somebody is saying, even if they don't really get it at all, or they haven't taken the time and looked and said, yes, I did. Like we were talking earlier, I disagree with this person, but let me figure out why they believe what they believe so that I can talk about that instead of just going in and tearing people down. And so you see a lot of ill-informed or uninformed discourse when it comes to religious matters online, because we have this understanding. If there's anything bad that's come from social media, and there's a lot of things bad that have come from social media, but there's one that sticks out as we're talking about this, it is we all think that everybody wants to hear our opinion about everything. And, I even think about that in my setting, like during the latest presidential election, we had, you always have your presidential debates and your vice presidential debates and all these things. So partially it was just as me wanting to pay attention to what was going on. I decided I'm going to live tweet these debates. And what I did was I would just take random quotes of what was being said and match them with GIFs. So the first debate I did with West Wing GIFs, and then the vice presidential debate I did with Veep GIFs, and then the third presidential debate I did with Schitt's Creek GIFs. And so I did this going on just kind of, and it was more for me and inside jokes with friends of mine. But you have to realize that, even though like in no way do I have any huge, national platform or anything, I have a platform when it comes to the people within my church and somewhat within my community. And so there were some people that saw what I put up there, knowing that I was pastor of the church, and got upset because I was quoting certain things that were being said. And I was like, that wasn't my opinion. I just said what Joe Biden said, or I just said what Donald Trump said. And I ended up going in because I had somebody say, that there were some people that were upset about it. I ended up going in and deleting all of those, even though I thought that they were fairly witty. But we have to realize that people don't need to know everything that we think, everything that we say about everything. And that's one of those things that I think that in a role where your job is to serve people and take care of them, you have to watch what it is that you're putting out there on social media. I think that's one of the things that, technologically can trip us up. And I think this speaks outside of just the pastoral role. We have to understand this just in general, that something that we say that is completely innocent and is in some ways innocuous can be taken wrongly by other people because they don't understand where we're coming from with it. And, one of the ugliest things online right now, in my opinion, is the Christian side of Twitter. There are so many people, so many pastors, so many leaders that are just so ugly to each other because of their disagreements on what in the end are minor things often. But, if our job is to share with others that we feel that you should live the way that Christ tells us to live, if we're not doing that in the most open-faced, front-facing thing that we have in our life, how's anybody going to listen to us when, we're not being particularly neighborly online and we're saying, oh, yeah, you need to love your neighbor. Well, that's not what it looked like yesterday when you said this to so-and-so. But,
right.
So I think there's all of these things that can kind of trip us up in that too.
Yeah, Twitter